I'd like to read you a letter from the mayor of Leavenworth, Washington, whose name is Carl J. Floria. This was published on May 28th, 2020, and it showcases exactly what I was talking about the sorts of rhetoric that will be popping up within various institutions of authority that is very similar to the rhetoric that we saw at a very small liberal arts college's protest 3 years ago. The letter reads, "Dear community members, as is my practice, I am going to share my thoughts with you on our current pandemic. But the pandemic I'm going to address is not COVID-19. You are going to get a bit of a respite on that one, or respite. I am talking about a pandemic that has been with us a lot longer, inflicting untold damage on individuals and entire communities. It brings death and destruction in its path, and there is not now, nor will there ever be, a vaccine. I am talking about the ingrained and institutionalized racism that continues to plague our great nation. The latest casualties are George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, their families and their communities. It is a rampant disease, often existing silently, just beneath the surface. It is far more widespread than any of us want to believe. We want to believe that it is isolated. We want to believe that it is restricted to the South. We want to believe it is restricted to larger cities, or large cities. Certainly, it is not a problem for us, is it? In truth, this is a disease in which all of us who are white are carriers. We all spread it, most often unwittingly, I would hope, but at times very blatantly. I can't imagine what it would be like every time you walk or jog in public to be accompanied by fear. Every time you are pulled over by a policeman to wonder if this might be the end. Every time you are in a store to have extra eyes following your every move. It is so far from my experience that I have a hard time comprehending that anyone would have to live this way, but those who are people of color do. What makes this pandemic so horrible is the fact that those who have it, those who carry it, those who spread it are not its victims. But over and over and over again, we see individuals and communities of color paying the price while we pretend it isn't really our problem. It is our problem, and it will be with us a lot longer than COVID-19. Long after we get a vaccine for that virus, we will be dealing with the insidious and pervasive effects of our racism. Unlike the COVID-19 battle, where we have been drilled into social distancing and separation, this pandemic will require social connection. We need to own the racism that exists in our own lives, as well as our institutions and societal norms. We need to be willing to be uncomfortable when confronted with the extent that we have been carriers of this disease. We need to learn from those who are its victims. We need to do what we can to cleanse our nation. It has not been easy. It will not be easy. It will take a lot of time and effort. But we cannot afford to just continue on the path we have been on. We cannot accept a society where the color of your skin alone means you must do everything with a nagging fear that you or someone you know and love may be its latest victim. We can and must do better. This is not a conservative or liberal issue. It is a human issue. Until it is addressed, we are all a little less human. And then kind of signed with the seal of the city of Leavenworth by Carl J. Floria, mayor. Now, there's a number of different aspects to this letter that are particularly telling, perhaps even disturbing when you get down to the sentence about cleansing our nation. But he says that we cannot accept a society where the color of your skin alone means you must do everything with a nagging fear that you or someone you know and love may be its latest victim, while at the same time saying that those who are white are its carriers and that there is no vaccine for this disease. And there's this image that he evokes of the person of color, as he puts it, is in a constant state of fear. Now, how would we actually solve that constant state of fear? By promulgating a narrative that says that if you are a person of color, you should be in a state of fear at all times. This is the problem. This is a very tricky problem with the narrative that the people of color in this country are in a constant state of being assaulted or harassed. And that might be true to a certain extent, that the likelihood of you being watched or you being followed or you being harassed by somebody in authority is increased because of the color of your skin. And that in and of itself is a problem that needs to be addressed and solved somehow. But by going so far as to constantly state that narrative and to, as I assume he's white, to project that state of fear and victimhood onto these other people actually demeans the ability for somebody of that skin color to not experience that, or to deal with that experience in a way that doesn't come down to them being assaulted by some sort of mind virus of racism. Speaking of a mind virus,
even the most liberal, well-intentioned white person has a virus in his or her brain that can be activated at an instant. And so what you're seeing now is a curtain falling away.
And what's that guy, the tubby guy with all the documentaries? Michael Moore, is it? He's saying that racism is America's original sin. There's this narrative that's being pushed by, actually, I would say these are left-leaning liberal individuals are the ones who are pushing this. And you will see this popping up in left-leaning liberal cities and municipalities. That's where this is going to take effect. It's not that this narrative is trying to explain away these problems. It's that it's explaining these problems in such a way that it roots the problems even deeper into us. And what you're going to have, one, the explanatory power of this narrative is actually very low. It actually reduces a lot of nuances of human communication and human interaction into this pitched battle of good versus evil, which doesn't do anybody any good. And what you're going to have is people who accept this narrative and line up into two camps of the obsequious oppressor and the victorious victim, and they will be spinning around each other like some sort of very riotous binary star system or something like that. And then you will have people who actively go out of their way to upset this narrative and to attack this narrative because they see that it is a fundamental assault on their own sovereignty, or being called a racist because of the color of your skin is going to cause people to be more and more blatantly against this narrative, which will cause, more and more fanaticism from the people who are touting this narrative. And the people who are touting this narrative already have some very disturbing tools at the ready to discount and to suppress people who question this narrative by calling them all these nasty names about supremacy and fragility and all of that stuff, which actually backfires in the sense of not leading us to a place where we can respectfully engage with each other on matters of police brutality, on matters of authoritarian overreach on a variety of different levels, and to try to engage in a society that is progressing forward. But because we are coming out of a pandemic frame of mind. The pandemic's not over, but I guess ipso facto, it's basically over now. We're coming out of a period of time where we are all crunched inside and now we're exploding outward. And there's a lot of excess energy that we're pouring into this particular cultural moment. And I would recommend that people who come across this stuff in their municipalities, and that's what's going to happen, is that people who are in positions of authority will start speaking like this, and you need to call this out and root it out. People in positions of power should not be going down the route of saying that white people are inherently diseased and racist and need to be cleansed of their sin. You don't want to allow this to happen. So I would suggest that people in the Leavenworth area contact their mayor, Carl J. Florea, and kind of talk him down from heading his little municipality down this very narrow path that has a cliff at the end. I would say that this has a cliff at the end. And to wrap up, I'm going through and I'm watching as much footage as I can of the protests and trying to find voices that are calm and chill, and even if I disagree with them, make their case in a forthright manner that kind of respects my ability to interpret the world on my own, doesn't have that cloying overreach. And what I really find disturbing is that you have white people who are trying to be allies go along and describe their process of education about humanizing people of color, their word, humanizing that subject that they think of as other than them. And you witness that development of their character, but there's this weird turn about wanting people based on their race to do better, to know better. And the problem that I have isn't that we don't have work to do on an individual and societal level. It's that you have these people with a certain narrative that they want to push on to everybody else, and they want everybody else to interpret the world in their way. And I really would like to engage with a narrative in a questioning, skeptical manner. And anybody who seeks to rob me of that, whether passive aggressively or openly, I'm going to trust even less. I'm going to trust their narrative even less if their narrative cannot withstand thorough assault or onslaught of criticism and a bunch of ad hominem straw men thrown at me for not getting on board with what they see to be the way that things should be solved. But absolutely, certainly, calling white people diseased and in need of being cleansed is not the way forward, and actually is quite disturbing if any sort of historical precedent with regards to calling certain people based on their race diseased and in need of being cleansed is to be taken seriously, which I think it should be taken seriously in this time, just as all others. Anyways, that was a Sunday little rant. You guys have a good day. Again, be safe, be wise, and I hope you are well. And I look forward to the discussion in the comments and see what else we can do to tease apart the forward march of a certain sort of Puritanism that is now attached to civil rights, which I think needs to be very, very carefully handled. That's my opinion. I'm sticking to it. Ciao.